afternoon. This is Chelsea Clark from L&W Insurance, and this is, I know, your favorite every other Friday segment of Ask an Agent. Today, and it's a rainy day. It's a terribly rainy day. It has been for the last couple of days. So I think that this is the perfect opportunity to talk about, dun dun dun, flood insurance. And today I am lucky enough to have wrangled up Billie Bennett, who is an absolute insurance master for our agency. She probably carries a bulk of the insurance knowledge for our personal insurance department. But on top of that, she is actually the flood guru for the entire agency. So she helps answer all of our questions for personal and commercial flood insurance. And since it is a topic that probably a lot of people have heard about but don't understand it as much as they need to, we're going to kind of break it down. Because at the end of the day, what the reality of flood insurance is that most of the time with most properties, and be it your home or your commercial business policy, flood insurance isn't automatically included. So it is a whole separate policy that you have to obtain. So we're going to try and break it down pretty simply for you. So we're going to start with the most simple question. Well, I say simple, but the most basic question. What is considered a flood from an insurance standpoint?
From an insurance standpoint, based on NFIP, it is an excess of water over normally dry land. Has to be 2 acres or more, or 2 properties or more. Basically in this area, it is inundation of rain or storm surge is what causes our flooding.
Mm-hmm. So heavily rains outside for 2 consistent days can cause a flood. Pipe burst in your basement, not flood.
No, that would be under your homeowner's insurance.
Mm-hmm. So rising water, inundation of rain, 2 properties or 2 acres, that's considered a flood. And also requires a whole separate policy. So when you are purchasing flood and you're trying to figure out whether your property is potentially at risk or greater risk, it feels like location is really important. So how do you know if you're at risk for flooding or at a greater risk for flooding?
Typically, if you're buying a new home, your mortgage is going to tell you.
Okay.
If you're paying cash for it, of course, you can always call an agent like us here at L&W. Or FEMA has a mapping tool that you can put your address in and it'll tell you what flood zone you're in.
So flood zones.
Mm-hmm.
Flood zones is a way to determine properties and how high of a risk they really are.
Correct.
Now, is everybody in a flood zone?
Yes, everybody's in a flood zone. It just depends on, like you said, how high of a risk you are.
Okay.
If you're in what they call a low risk zone, which is an X, you are not going to be required to carry flood insurance for a federal backed loan.
Got it.
If you're in what they call the higher risk or the special hazard flood zones of an AE or a VE, then you are going to have flood insurance for that federal backed loan.
Okay. So required flood insurance is something that we hear about on a regular basis, but required doesn't necessarily always equate to necessary. So anybody can choose to purchase it, but obviously the pricing and the guidelines would be different for high risk versus non.
Correct.
Okay.
If you're not in that high risk, you're in that low risk, you can elect to purchase it. Everybody should have it because everybody can flood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of if you have that nicer package policy that has the lower rates, or if you're going to have the higher rates based on your particular home.
Okay. So inland homes, you are still at risk. It's just a lower risk. If you're sitting oceanfront, you're obviously in a much higher risk, and that's when you're going to probably find yourself, whether it's your business or your home, being required to have flood insurance by any of your federally backed mortgages, loans, etc.
Correct.
So once you've determined that flood insurance is probably a good idea, I'm going to need this for my business or my home, what do you need to do to kind of start that process? What's needed to get flood insurance?
The basic information, of course. So we need to know what type of property is it. Is it commercial? Is it personal? When it comes to personal, then we need a little bit more information. Is it your primary home, your secondary home, a rental? And then once we run the zone determination to find out where you are, that is going to determine the additional pieces we need. Like, do we need an elevation certificate for your property? How old is the property? And that age of the property is going to determine if we need that elevation certificate to write you a policy.
elevation certificate. Guaranteed you have heard that word if you have had any kind of association with flood. What's a basic breakdown of what an elevation certificate is?
It's basically going to give us detailed information of how your home sits compared to the grade of the land
Okay.
and the base elevation for your area, what your area is going to flood at.
So essentially, the higher up you are, the more protected you are on that front layer, the better your rates could potentially
Correct.
be. Okay. And an elevation certificate is going to tell that. And so a surveyor would help put that together, and then that's what Billie, our flood guru, would then be able to use to help see where you would fall into the ratings.
Correct.
So for the longest time, flood insurance was federally mandated. National Flood Insurance Program was your primary source for any flood, but in recent years, private markets have come out and have allowed there to be a little bit more competition in coverages and in pricing. So how do you feel about those private markets? Do they make sense in some situations?
Oh, definitely they make sense. Shopping flood insurance right now is like shopping at homeowners.
Okay.
You can go out to 5-6 different carriers, get 5-6 different rates.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are going to be with your excess market, so your Lloyd's of London that people are probably very familiar with because of everything that you insure outside of property insurance. And they don't always require the EC that FEMA does.
Okay.
Sometimes they do not penalize you as heavily if you have a negative elevation compared to FEMA does.
Okay. So options.
Mhm.
Once
They are
again, and I talk about this a lot with independent agencies, but options are available. And where flood insurance didn't necessarily have as many options before, it can be confusing. It is an ever-changing type of insurance, but now with the private markets, there's a lot of options. So what you need is experts to help you walk through that process. And luckily we have Billie, who does know all of that, and she stays up to date on all of the changes that are constantly happening with FEMA and NFIP and with the private markets. So flood insurance and where you need to get your questions answered is here, and Billie can help do that for you. And I think that probably covers it for now without getting too mired down into all the knowledge. We could probably get lost in how much knowledge Billie has about flood insurance. So we'll leave it there for now. But thank you for tuning in, and we hope this has been helpful, and we will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.